N 2003, diggers inside a limestone cave on the Indonesian island of Flores hit something that stopped the excavation cold, a nearly complete skeleton, standing barely over a meter tall, with a brain the size of a chimpanzee S. At first, they assumed it was a child. Then they checked the teeth. Fully grown, adult, and roughly 60,000 years old. They called it Liang Bua hominin one. The world would come to know it as the Hobbit. That skeleton raised an immediate, uncomfortable question, one that archaeology still hasn't fully answered. Flores sits inside a strip of Indonesian islands called Wallacea, and Wallacea has never, in its entire geological history, touched the mainland. Even at the lowest sea levels of the ice ages, the water crossing onto Flores was still at least 24 kilometers wide. No ice age land bridge, no shortcut, just open, current-driven ocean. So how did a species with a brain, a third the size of ours, end up living there? To understand why that S strange, you need to understand the line that runs straight through this part of the world. In the 1850s, naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace noticed something odd. While collecting specimens in Indonesia, the animals on one side of a narrow strait looked completely Asian tigers, monkeys, elephants. Cross the strait, and suddenly, the wildlife looked Australian marsupials, cockatoos, no big cats at all. The channel separating them is just 35 kilometers wide in places. Yet it marked a barrier deep enough to stay flooded even when ice age sea levels dropped, and land bridges opened up everywhere else nearby. That barrier is Wallace Line, and almost nothing large managed to cross it under its own power. Almost nothing. Flores lies deep inside Wallacea, east of Wallace Line, a chain of islands that have rarely, if ever, been connected by land to either the Asian mainland or the Australian continent. That isolation is exactly why the island's wildlife stayed so strange for so long. No big predators, no large grazers, nothing that could swim or drift across and survive to breed. Instead, Flores had giant rats, giant storks, and a dwarfed species of elephant called stegodon that had shrunk down to fit its cramped island world. And somehow, walking among them was a hominin. Here's where the story gets deeper than one skeleton. Liang Bua wasn't at the first evidence of humans on Flores, it was one of the last. Stone tools scattered on the island date back at least 1 million years, found at a site called Wolo Sege, long before anything resembling the Hobbit existed at Liang Bua. Something with hands and the intention to strike stone into a cutting edge was already living on this isolated island 1 million years ago. Then, in 2016, researchers digging in Central Flores so a basin found something that rewrote the timeline. Again, fragments of hominin fossils dated to about 700,000 years ago at a site called Menge, teeth, a jaw fragment. The individuals had lived on hot, dry savanna grassland, and the stone tools beside them looked strikingly similar to the much younger tools from Liang Bua. The bones were small, not modern human, small, genuinely tiny, on par with or below the Hobbit itself. In 2024, a fossilized arm bone from the same site made the point even sharper. Researchers described it as the smallest upper arm bone ever recovered anywhere in the entire hominin fossil record. This wasn't TA population caught mid-shrink. Drastic reduction in jaw and tooth size on Flores had already happened by the early Middle Pleistocene, more than 600,000 years before the first Liang Bua fossils. Whatever crossed onto this island didn't arrive small. It arrived, and then it shrank, fast, and then it apparently just stayed that way, for over 500,000 years. Which brings the mystery back to the beginning. sharper than before. Something got onto Flores at least 1 million years ago. It got small almost immediately, and it never got big again, because getting off the island was just as hard as getting on. So how does a hominin cross open ocean 1 million years before boats show up anywhere in the archaeological record? Researchers studying the Hobbit's geometry concluded the ancestors of Homo floresiensis had to cross open water by some currently unknown, probably one-off or occasional mechanism, most likely rafting, whether that rafting was accidental or deliberate. Paleontologists have a blunt name for this kind of crossing a sweepstake dispersal. Chance decides which of the countless species trying to reach an island actually make it. Picture the mechanism seriously. A tropical storm hits the coast of a nearby island. Trees, tangled with soil and roots, get ripped loose and swept out to sea, carrying whatever animals happen to be clinging to them. Most rafts like this sink or drift into empty ocean or land on shorelines already hostile to survival. Almost every species that tries this dies. Wallace's fossil record is full of the ones that didn't make it because almost nothing did. Other animals are known to have reached Flores this same way, by swimming or floating on debris. Giant tortoises, stegodon, Komodo dragons. The hominins may simply be one more entry on that list, intelligent enough to survive the landing, unlucky or resourceful enough to have been on the raft in the first place. But not every researcher agrees on where that raft even launched from. The traditional assumption has been that Homo floresiensis' ancestors dispersed onto Flores from Java to the west. But newer analysis of ancient ocean currents suggests dispersal from the north, from Sulawesi, may have actually been more likely. That question matters because in 2025, archaeologists announced stone tools on Sulawesi, dating back over 1 million years, among the oldest hominin evidence anywhere in Wallacea, potentially made by relatives of the very lineage that later reached Flores. And Homo floresiensis wasn't even the only hominin doing the impossible. Genetic evidence from Denisovans, a separate archaic human population known mostly from DNA in Siberian caves, shows interbreeding signals concentrated specifically in populations living east of Wallace Line, meaning the Denisovans, too, must have somehow made a marine crossing that shouldn't have been survivable without technology. So this wasn't one freak accident. It was starting to look like a repeatable, if brutal, filter one that at least 3 separate hominin lineages managed to slip through, each without any evidence of boats, sails, or paddles. The ending of the Hobbit story adds one more layer of urgency to all of this. For years, researchers believed Homo floresiensis survived on Flores until as recently as 12,000 years ago, meaning it could have overlapped with modern humans for tens of thousands of years. A 2016 reanalysis pushed that extinction date back dramatically to around 50,000 years ago, just before or right around when Homo sapiens is thought to have arrived in the region. Which means the species that crossed an unsurvivable strait shrank to under 4 feet and endured on one isolated island for close to 1 million years, may have vanished at almost the exact moment our own species finally solved the same crossing it had faced from the very beginning. Nobody has found the raft. Nobody has found a boat. The mechanism that carried a tiny-brained hominin across one of the most effective biological barriers on Earth remains, officially, unknown, logged in the literature as chance, as a sweepstake, as something we can infer happened, but cannot yet prove how. Which leaves one uncomfortable possibility still sitting on the table. that crossing Wallace Line wasn't a fluke of geology or driftwood at all, that something in that small skull was already capable of more than we've been willing to credit it for.